Man wrote a book recently called Love Wins. Big controversy about that. And the idea is that in the end, God's love is going to reconcile everybody back to Him, even the devil. And you think, well, wait a minute. That might be a little too much. Love never lets you all go. Love will never let you down. But love also doesn't let you off. When you let someone off from responsibility for the choice in their actions, you're called an enabler. You're not a friend. Love will stand there with you as you have to deal with the problem, but it will require you and equip you to deal with the problem. It won't just push it under the rug like you didn't real. And God looks down at you through history, and He sees you and He loves you. He fixed His love upon you. And He loves you with an everlasting love. But there's a problem. David was reading about it a moment ago. Through the disobedience of one. You know what? You're disobedient. You're a sinner. Sin is rebellion against God. I'll do it my way, not your way. And when God looks at you and He loves you, He'll love you in spite of your sin, but love isn't all that God is. God is righteous. God is just. His throne, the book of Psalms talks about, there's not a verse in the Bible that says His throne is established in His sovereignty. That's an interesting idea for you theologians. But His throne is established in His righteousness and in His justice. These are the attributes, the personal attributes of God that establish what He does and who He is. And His justice, righteousness looks at you and says, you come short. And love says, but I still love Him. But righteousness says, but we got a problem. And justice says, the problem is you came short. And the justice of God is sort of like the enforcer of the righteousness. God's holiness is made up of His righteousness and His justice. Two of His characteristics. And justice says He can't come in because He's a sinner. And God's love still is attached. And yet, you're unrighteous. And so the love of God, not to be outdone, goes to the wisdom of God, another one of His attributes, and says, can't you figure a way to fix this? And the wisdom of God says, well, we can't change who we are. We're righteous. So what do we need to do? We need to change who you are and make you righteous. And the wisdom of God, that's why Paul says we speak the wisdom of God, the wisdom of God in a mystery. That's why he says that the mystery that we preach, this message we preach, declares and sets forth the manifold wisdom of God. That's why he says that in Him, in Christ, are hid all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. The wisdom of God devised a plan that He called grace. You see, grace is not one of the characteristics of God. Grace is the plan of God whereby His character can include you too. And so grace is all that God's wisdom has designed to accomplish your and I's redemption and life. So His attributes aren't in conflict with one another. They work together. And so the wisdom of God made the plan. In fact, if you go down to verse number, if you go back with me to Ephesians 1, if you go down to, you see how he says in verse 1, grace be to you and peace from God our Father and from the Lord Jesus Christ. If you go down to verse number 7, in whom we have redemption through His blood, talking about Christ, the forgiveness of sins according to the riches of His grace. I use that title, the riches of His grace, for our radio program. One of the things, that expression, the riches of His grace, in order for God to manifest and express His grace, it cost Him a lot. That's why He had to be rich to do it. You ever wanted to buy something and you didn't have the wherewithal to do it? You weren't rich enough? God was rich. And when he talks about His grace, he's talking about it in the context of the costliness of His grace. And it cost God. Listen, don't let anybody ever tell you that this thing about cheap grace. Anything that costs God the life of His own Son, the second person of the Godhead, the one that back in the Old Testament He calls Him the apple of His eye, the one in whom He finds all of His delight. Paul says that it pleased the Father that in Him should all fullness dwell. The Father made Him to be the preeminent one. The hero of the Father's heart is His Son. And that's what it cost Him. It cost the Son, though He were rich, yet for your sakes He became poor. 2 Corinthians 8, verse 9, Paul says, we know the grace of God. Though He were rich, yet He became poor. It cost God. It cost God the Son. But the plan goes way back. Verse number 9, having made known unto us the mystery of His will, that's the Father's will, according to His good pleasure, notice, which He purposed in Himself. That discussion I was describing a moment ago between the love of God and the righteousness of God and the justice of God and the wisdom of God, I was just describing something about the thought process that went on in the heart, in the innermost being of God Himself. He has a plan. He's working out a plan today that He purposed in Himself. It's a plan that comes out of His innermost being. That's why down in verse 17, He's called the Father of glory. Glory is the name of the plan. That's why all the times when you read about glory in the Bible, 1 Peter 4, I was mentioning it again, he talks about some things happening, and then the Spirit of grace and glory rest upon you. You know what that is? That's the outworking of the plan, living in their life. So grace is a wonderful thing. It's not enough just to say it's unmerited favor. Well, you know you didn't deserve it. But you know, you look next to you at your spouse, and you didn't deserve her either, you know. Thank goodness you married up a little bit. Some of us a lot. Yeah, that's right. So you can say, I got undeserved favor there. But this is something far more than that. It's really the content of everything God has planned from the innermost sanctuary of His own heart to accomplish through His Son. And you're a part of it. It's given to you. Oh, that's a big thing.